Felt like that one was loud last year. How is that relationship now? And how do you view that time looking back on it with Aiyuk?
Relationship's good. Looking back on the Brandon situation, I look at things like that, like what could we have done differently? Sometimes those things are tough. They can be contentious. There's things that I learned that would we have done some things differently? And I think Brandon, are there things he would have done differently? Absolutely. But one thing, I think in families, you have little spats and then you give a big hug at the end and you work together, and that's where we're at.
What is going on with Brandon Aiyuk? A 49ers wide receiver who was once beloved by all the fan base has now become a very polarizing player within the organization. There's been a lot of buzz, a lot of opinions swirling around wide receiver one, Brandon Aiyuk, and the San Francisco 49ers. Is he unhappy? Does he want to be there? Do the 49ers have a problem? Should they trade him? A lot of speculation occurring right now as mandatory veteran minicamp is officially underway, which Brandon Aiyuk has shown up. So had to jump on here and give perspective from both sides. And if there's a problem, what should be done? So with that being said, back at it talking 49ers football. Let's get into it, y'all. Yo, what's up, everybody? It's your boy, Ryan Tigey, back in action. Mandatory veteran minicamp officially kicked off. And the 49ers, they had 100% attendance. Everybody was there. Everybody's looking good. People are fired up for the new season. You gotta love it. Things are getting off on the right foot for the San Francisco 49ers. But one person that was there is getting a lot of attention. Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk has been a very polarizing subject for 49ers fans and pundits over the past, really, about year it's been going on now. We all know the Brandon Aiyuk issues really kicked off last year during his contract negotiation. He was coming off a 2023 season where he absolutely balled. Over 1,000 yards receiving, dude was a stud, should have been all pro, he wasn't, but nonetheless, the guy had a phenomenal season, which then led him into a contract negotiation. Now, not to make it all about that, but it is where the situation got a little dicey is when the contract negotiation kicked off. Brandon Aiyuk went on a worldwide press tour, basically trying to promote himself and his value and the money that he should be paid and why it's justified.
You can't afford a Lamborghini, you can't have one.
Long story short, Brandon Aiyuk, who didn't show up for any of OTAs, any of training camp until his deal got officially done. And for those like you and I who knew, because we've seen it from other players, it clearly hindered his performance leading into the 2024 season. He was not the same Brandon Aiyuk. Him and Brock Purdy were not on the same page. They were starting to get on the same page, but then he got injured. And it wasn't just a normal sprained ankle injury. His knee got fucked up. ACL, MCL, and some additional ligament damage. From that's when things really started to turn south. Brandon Aiyuk is getting paid a large sum of money, $30 million on average per year. And I'll just say it right off the bat, I think he's worth all of that money. But really, where the issues stem from is a lot of what Brandon Aiyuk does and doesn't do. And then on top of that, a lot of conflicting reports that are coming out from the building. For those that haven't seen, Brandon Aiyuk's team photo was recently released that's going to be on the 49er website for this year. I'm not really one to judge a team photo. In fact, I never have. But considering how much spotlight has been on Brandon Aiyuk, I did see it come across my feed. And yeah, I'll admit, it doesn't look great. I'm not saying you got to be there cheesing ear to ear, but it does look like a guy who isn't that happy. But is he not that happy because of the 49ers or because of his situation? Because put yourself in his perspective. We hear about it from players all the time. They fight to get their contract. They fight to get the money that they feel they deserve. They end up getting it. And then naturally, when you're getting paid a large sum of cash, you have a lot of pressure on yourself. They put a lot of pressure to live up to what they're getting paid. And I think that is absolutely the fact of what happened with Brandon Aiyuk. yes, it did hurt him not going to OTAs and to training camp, clearly. Was that the reason he got hurt? No. That was a freak accident where that safety from the Chiefs just came up and hit him in the right spot at the right time. But it definitely played into why he had such a rough or rocky or slow start beginning of last year. But again, you hear about players talking about that pressure after they signed the first deal. Hell, it happened to Fred Warner. Fred Warner's openly talked about it when he got his first contract with the 49ers. His year immediately following that, it wasn't great. It definitely wasn't his best, anywhere near his best, and that is something he openly admits and talks about because the pressure and the expectations of living up to a contract when you get paid a fat sum of money. I believe truly that's what happened with Brandon Aiyuk. The pressure got to him, didn't have the training he needed going up into the season, and so the season just kind of fell apart. And then to make things worse, he got a nasty injury. But then you hear players talk about when you're in rehab, how you're away from the team and truly how lonely it is. You are not involved really on many teams' dynamics at all. Yes, you're still potentially in team meetings, but you're not traveling with the team. You're not on the field with the team. There's just a lot of things that people necessarily don't think about when they're talking about Brandon Aiyuk coming off an injury. And I get it. He did not do much to help himself last offseason, going on that media tour, showing up, getting into a little spat with Kyle about the wrong colored shorts that he was supposed to be wearing during practice. I get all that. But where I think this really stems from and why Brandon Aiyuk is so polarizing is because of the fact people aren't taking into account this guy has been through a lot. Now, I'm not going to say you and I should feel bad for a guy who's just getting paid $30 million a year dealing with an injury, playing professional football. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying from a player's perspective, this is all going into why Brandon Aiyuk's body language is reflecting what I think a lot of people are getting pissed about. Because as I sit here today, there are people still openly discussing that the 49ers should trade Brandon Aiyuk. He's disgruntled. He doesn't want to be here. Terry McLaurin is not happy with the Washington Commanders. They should do a swap. Terry McLaurin for Brandon Aiyuk. The problem is with all this trade talks is that Brandon Aiyuk, he is coming off a nasty injury. There's not many teams that are just going to sign up willy-nilly, take on Brandon Aiyuk's contract, and then give the 49ers a player back. The 49ers, they're not in the driving seat when it comes to a trade for Brandon Aiyuk. And when Brandon Aiyuk had the opportunity to get traded to the Patriots, to the Steelers, to the Browns, he turned them all down. So for the people that say Brandon Aiyuk, he has an icy relationship with Brock Purdy, he doesn't want to be on the 49ers anymore, he had the opportunity to leave, and he chose not to. So I think that right there kind of solidifies Brandon Aiyuk wants to be a 49er. Shit, he grew up rooting for the 49ers. It's his mom's team. So I think that that's overblown to the extreme. Now, if Brandon Aiyuk was open to being traded, I would 100% say the 49ers, if they could get a player like Terry McLaurin with not manipulating, if it was just a one-for-one trade, yeah, I would do that. But the fact is, that's not going to happen because it's not a one-for-one trade because there is history to now Brandon Aiyuk, and it's just not something that is easy to do. It gets a lot more complicated when you have a significant injury and on top of it, a fat contract getting paid top of market. And then, of course, there is the social media, the cryptic social media shit. Brandon Aiyuk posting on Instagram saying not to cry about him and people who are over the age of 30 should just mind their business. I just truly believe that is a guy who's a little bit more sensitive because, again, I think he's depressed, honestly. You get paid a fat contract, expectations are high, you're on cloud nine, boom, you get injured, you're out, you're away from the team. Now you're hearing people talk shit about you, speculate from you. I think it is just him being a normal human being trying to fight back and basically talk his shit to people that are commenting on him all the time. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think it doesn't look great. I would not be one to say if someone's talking shit to you, just don't say anything at all. Hell, the people that are able to do that, that's mad respect. But there's a lot of people out there that just wouldn't do it. Let alone when you're in your early to mid 20s, you're a rich professional athlete. It'd be even more hard not to comment to the couch warriors who are just talking shit and kind of dragging your name through dirt. So I get it from his perspective, but I just think from the 49ers position, they are in an interesting spot with him because time heals all wounds, as the saying goes. And I believe that if Brandon Aiyuk can come back, he's at mandatory veteran minicamp, which is great. The guy showed up. He's doing what he can. Hell, he's not even in a knee brace anymore, so clearly he is trending in the right direction from his injury. But Kyle Shanahan did come out and say that he's most likely not going to be ready for training camp, let alone maybe potentially early into the regular season. And then you hear the wide receiver coach, Hankerson, talking about Brandon Aiyuk in one of the pressers that they recently did. And he was talking about how Brandon Aiyuk is taking a leadership role, that he wanted Brandon Aiyuk to help him coach the young guys in the wide receiver room, and that Brandon Aiyuk has been phenomenal at doing so. So there's a lot of mixed signals and a lot of things being said about Brandon Aiyuk. So it is kind of hard to understand is what's really happening. What is Brandon Aiyuk really thinking, and how are the 49ers really viewing him? Because there was quite an interesting tidbit. I know there were some other people out there reporting. They are more of the people that just want to stir the pot, create negativity, but that Brandon Aiyuk didn't congratulate Brock Purdy on getting his contract, and that their relationship is icy. They're not on the same page. I personally don't remember seeing Brandon Aiyuk congratulate Brock Purdy. So if he did, this shouldn't even be talked about. But if he didn't, that's kind of sketch. Your quarterback from a team you just got paid $30 million to, you're not going anywhere. You had the opportunity to move on. You chose not to. But not congratulating your quarterback when the last time you really played with him, you had over 1,000+ yards receiving, that would just be weird, and that would not be a good look. But who knows? Even if he didn't do it on social media, he could have called him. He could have texted him. We don't know. But if he didn't congratulate Brock Purdy on his contract deal, like all the other players did on the team, that would be a little sketch. And another thing, as I'm talking about this, that I do believe played a big impact was the lack of targets Brandon Aiyuk got in the Super Bowl against the Chiefs. That's in fact where it really started, now that I think about it. Brandon Aiyuk's brother at the time were throwing it out there that Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be on the 49ers. This is going to be probably his last game that he ever played with the 49ers. He's going to go to the Las Vegas Raiders. And then that's when, boom, they roll into the offseason. The contract negotiation starts. More drama comes from that. So really, this all stems from the Super Bowl and the lack of targets Brandon Aiyuk got during that game. That is interesting. But in the reality, over the overarching thing of what I believe is going on right now is that Brandon Aiyuk is battling back from an injury. He's getting paid a lot of money. He wants to perform. You play football because you love football, and he probably just wants to get back to being on the field with the guys around the team, scoring touchdowns, making big catches like we've seen him do. So I think a lot of this gets blown out of proportion. Yes, some of it is coming from puns and fans that have legitimate criticisms. Also, some of it does come from Brandon's cryptic messages, and that's the thing about a cryptic message. He tells people not to comment on his situation, but then yet that's exactly what cryptic tweets and IG messages do. It leaves it up for interpretation about what do you mean. If you mean something, then just say it, and then that will negate any problem you have with all your tweets and people dragging your name through mud. So I believe Brandon Aiyuk is able to get back on the field. Now, the biggest question is how quickly is he going to be able to get back? Not just on the field, but back in rhythm with Brock Purdy. Because this team is going to be different this year, not so much on the offensive side of the ball. The 49ers are going to need Brandon Aiyuk. But there are also other guys that they've had to move into place because of his absence. Juwan Jennings, wide receiver number 1. Ricky Pearsall took massive steps toward the end of the season. What's he going to do year 2? Jacob Cowing, is he going to see the field more? So there's no question that the 49ers absolutely could use Brandon Aiyuk. The question is how quickly does he get integrated back into the primary X receiver role now that Juwan Jennings has been taking snaps and has been a Super Bowl reliable, absolute dog. Juwan Jennings he's been a stud since Brandon Aiyuk has been out or in place of Brandon Aiyuk, even though he's a stud prior to that. So that's my biggest concern, because we saw last year him not going to training camp and OTAs, how he got off to a slow start. Well, now he hasn't played football for even longer. Gonna miss OTAs, gonna miss most likely all of training camp and even a couple games leading into the season. So it's going to be challenging for Brandon Aiyuk. I don't think he's going to immediately get back to his 2023 level of playing on the field, but I do think at some point he will get back there. It just may not be this year, or if it is, it'll be late into the season, but which is still fine because the 49ers will need it, because they are going to be making the playoffs this year. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. So I just should jump on here, give my 2 cents about BA situation going on. Very polarizing player right now. Some of it I understand. A lot of it I just think is getting blown out of proportion. But as I mentioned from up top, veteran mandatory minicamp. You see all the players out there on the field, 100% attendance, which you absolutely love. A lot less drama, if not really any drama, outside of the Brandon Aiyuk buzz. But he's there. And I think this team is in a much better place, had a longer offseason, as we all know, and everyone looks healthy. Everyone looks light. Things are looking good right now. Then they go on a 30 to 45 day hiatus. And then, boom, we're into football, training camp, pads on, strap it up, let's go. So, all right, y'all, I'll be back. But until my next video, make sure you like, comment, subscribe. You know the deal. Hit me up. Peace.